I would like to welcome back to Coast AM our good friend, Dr. Stephen GREER. Dr. GREER.
Hello.
How are you? Everything good?
Yeah, we're doing very well. How are you doing? But what became very clear to me in the 1990s is that alone isn't going to change anything, that we're going to have to connect some dots. And the way they work is, and I have people on my team who've been in these types of projects, is that it doesn't matter how high the rank of the person is who may ask about what you're doing. If they're not directly read into or briefed on an unacknowledged special access project, everyone in that project is to turn to them and say, no such project exists. And that includes whether it's the president asking, the CIA director that I briefed is asking, the Secretary of Defense that Gordon Cooper and I approached, who was Secretary of Defense Cohen, for President Clinton, etc. In 100 years, we have killed hundreds of millions of people of our own people in warfare. We've gone from cannons and machine guns to thermonuclear weapons to now degrading the biosphere to such a point that one of the 5 directors of NASA told me that if the public knew how bad it was, there'd be panic.
We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
Now I'd just like to get where Dr. GREER, you're right here, so please come out. Give me a warm up. Thank you very much.
I can remember this, I won't break my leg again. Anyway, thank you very much, and I love what Jeff is doing because it's grassroots, it's here, and I love Denver, love Colorado. This is one of the first places that we really started organizing all of this was in the Denver area, so thank you for showing up here tonight. You're all great. This next one, go ahead and show it. I just want to show this because in 92 we went there and we went up to a place and we was at Woodbury Hill and created in our minds a tone and then a shape. This was a shape we projected to the ETs. The next morning it was found in the field. It was the most authentic crop circle of that year. You can see us standing in it. And it's a equilateral crop circle that was visualized and created by the CD5 initiative team. We are standing in it with members of the team and some journalists and researchers from Germany and elsewhere. You can see it is perfect in how it is laid down. It's connected. There's a triangle here. Here's a circle. Go again, 1, 2, 3. And you can see that it is absolutely perfect. We had been visualizing precisely this formation. And we had been making a triangle in the sky with the circles. And this is what has appeared in this area immediately related to that event. And And this was the same week we had a 100-foot diameter disc fully materialize in the field.
Nature has been very kind. We are free to do anything that we are smart enough to discover how, but we've got to use our brain and our mind to discover how. But the mechanism is there for us to do it. I fully believe that. And inventors I work with, I will state point blank, at least, two of the very brilliant inventors I work with have produced free energy devices that are real and do work, and I personally have measured and dealt with the devices. They're real, they work, it can be done. And so it's an energy which has the aspect of restoring the biosphere and restoring life. For example, it's clean, so you wouldn't have all the pollutants from burning fuels and so forth, and for the nuclear byproducts and so forth. It's very clean fuel. You have absolutely nothing left but just energy. And you can transform it from either negative to positive. If you need the form of positive energy, you can do that. You can transform it back to negative, and you can reach a very nice energy balance in nature. It has some other very positive benefits that don't show at first glance. The Earth, Sun, and Moon are connected not only by radiation of the normal electromagnetic energy, the external scattering stuff, but the half that's left out, the internal hidden energy. If you pollute one part of this system, the pollution feeds and spreads to the whole tri-system. Literally, we are polluting not only the Earth presently, but we are also polluting the Moon and the Sun in the scalar components. And that's what is gradually being radiated back to us. And so the very vital part of the energy that living systems have to have continually to be living systems and maintain their life is slowly being affected. And of course we need to clean that act up right away, because that's the worst kind of pollution we can possibly have.
I'll whip through this quickly because I've talked about this in my books at great length, and I've talked about this at Under London Talks. But I say the moon is a construct or a part construct. This is a book called Who Built the Moon by Christopher Knight and Alan Butler. It's absolutely brilliant in the way that it puts the case for the moon not being real in terms of a natural body. But interestingly, what they find in that book is the mathematics and geometry between the sun, the moon, and the earth are fantastic in terms of their synchronicity, and it does not apply in any way to the rest of the solar system. And the Gnostic writings found in Nag Hammadi in 1945, 1,600 years old or more, say that this is a separate system operating within the Archon system of the inorganic universe. They say in the book, the authors, the maths involved in the Earth, Moon, Sun system is nothing less than staggering, and that the moon has been put there with the accuracy of the proverbial Swiss watchmaker.
I work principally as a conceptual artist. Most of my clients are in the defense industry. I occasionally work directly for the military, but most of the time I work for civilian corporations that are defense contractors. They build weapon systems and things for the military. So this all kind of came full circle for me, but the thing that Brad said when he described this Aurora type aircraft in this hangar, along with these other unusual vehicles, was that it employed a very unusual kind of technology. That it had two propulsion systems, not just one. That there were engines inside the fuselage of the aircraft that had trap doors that would open up so that it could fly using these internal engines. And then when it would get up to, say, 2.5 or 3 times the speed of sound, where the air coming over the top of this aircraft is compressed and superheated and really, really hot, forming the shock wave coming off this aircraft, that they had a way of closing all of these exhaust chutes and these inlets for these I guess there were 4 engines inside the aircraft. And there was an external type of pulse detonation engine that would operate, and there was a kind of shallow ridge that ran laterally across the belly and the backbone of the aircraft at the widest part. There were no wings and no tails on this aircraft that Brad had seen in the hangar. But along this ridge were all these little tiny orifices, these little, looked like fuel injectors pointing outward into the airstream directly behind this ridge. I mean, if it flew this way, they would point towards the back. And the idea was that as a supersonic shock wave would form over the front of the aircraft and it would separate from the surface of the aircraft right where that little ridge was, they would spray fuel into the superheated, highly compressed air, and it would explode. It would spontaneously explode. And as it did so, it would expand between the tapered afterbody of the vehicle and the shock wave that came off those ridges, so it was like an exhaust cone turned inside out, and it would pinch the back end of the vehicle and shoot it forward at speeds of something like 10 or 15,000 miles an hour. I mean, just incredible, faster than a rifle bullet, basically. And that was part of the reason the whole thing was covered with these ceramic tiles, is to protect it from melting when it's flying through the air. The other thing that he said about that aircraft was that it had these circular launch tubes in the belly of the vehicle, each of which carried a single cone-shaped nuclear-powered or conventionally loaded warhead in a reentry vehicle that could be guided into precision and individually guided to targets. And the way the system operated was just absolutely beautiful and elegant and simple. And they had a tile on the outside with explosive bolts holding it in place, and it was flush with the tiles on the belly of the vehicle. And up inside this tube was this cone-shaped reentry vehicle pointing nose down, possibly having a kind of a sabot or a three-piece spacer in there that would hold it centered in the tube. And then directly above that and behind it was another circular tile, and then behind that was a big coiled spring. And what they would do is they would fire off the explosive bolts, the spring would push this reentry vehicle out of the tube, the sabot would fly away in pieces, the thing would stabilize in the airstream. If you ever want to see this, take a piece of paper and curl it up into a little cone, put a little, like a fishing weight in the nose, and toss it out the window of your car when you're doing 60 miles an hour, and it stabilizes just perfect, and then it'll fly away from the car. But that's how they would launch these things, and then the spring would slam this tile down into place, and instantly you'd have perfect aerodynamic efficiency again in just a fraction of a second. So you could spit these things out. The tiles, probably explode when the explosive bolts go off. The sabot was probably fiberglass, something that would be harmless coming back through the atmosphere, because they fly at extremely high altitudes. But these things had the ability to be just about anywhere in the world in 30 minutes after launch, with the capability of 121 nuclear, probably 10, 15 megaton weapons, a tactical type nuclear reentry vehicle. And
this is Dabu7, an earthquake update here, as we've seen more significant quakes around the globe, and really it looks like some earth changes are in the making. We have global activity when it comes to these significant quakes. They're popping up in different areas, and some of the places that we've seen activity in the past, like Chile, are starting to go quiet. Peru, this pinch down here, where we've seen 7-pointers come from before. Now, what's been interesting is in the past 48 hours, the Virgin Islands, its swarm has picked up to about the same pace as Southern California's. Now, as I was talking about Alaska, I want you to notice there's quite a swarm that's picked up here, just here in the past few hours. So there's definitely something going on globally when it comes to earth changes. Now, I will say this, in the past, we've tried to correlate the connection between the sun's activity, and the earthquakes, because we've seen that they've overlapped, and there's been a lot of similarities. When there's been a lot of sun activity, incoming CMEs, it has coincided with upticks in significant quakes.
There was another small earthquake this morning in eastern Connecticut, the 12th in a week. Nobody seems to know why. Here's Jerika Duncan.
In the last week, rattled Plainfield, Connecticut residents have made more than 300 calls to 911.
I just had a big explosion. I don't know what it is, but my whole house shook. It's coming from all over the area. I'm getting lots of calls, Sam.
Marion Diggs says she's felt every earthquake.
I was sitting in bed drinking my early morning cup of coffee before everybody got up, my time, and all of a sudden I heard this loud boom.
People here have reported minor damage from the 12 earthquakes that have hit between the towns of Danielson and Plainfield. Most have been under a 2 magnitude. The largest occurred Monday morning at 3.1. Seismologists at Boston College Western Observatory are collecting data on the frequent tremors, hoping to find out why the so-called swarms are happening. Dr. John Eagle.
We've had a few scattered epicenters in the past from that part of the state, but this is something that's new for us.
Scientists tell us earthquakes are usually caused when underground plates move from side to side. In Connecticut, the plates are moving up and down.
Hey folks, it's Sunday, January 4th, about 3:20 Mountain Time, 2015. Quick video about the supposed earthquake up here in near Challis, Idaho, that occurred just a few hours ago. I find something very suspicious about the returns of the seismograph readings that felt the supposed earthquake. And here is one right here from Boise State University, a guy posted. And the energy readings on these seismographs run from left to right. So what do we see from left to right? Instant vertical energy. That is definitely not consistent with a typical earthquake. So that tells us one thing, that this energy burst came from the sky or very close, if not on top of the ground. Number two, the caldera at Yellowstone supervolcano, which is right pretty much next door to where this supposed earthquake took place. These are seismographs that sit on top of the caldera. These are showing signatures of vertical energy releases that are being recorded on these seismographs. And again, the energy readings run from left to right. So left to right, kapow. We have a burst of energy that then simmers down into the traditional earthquake primary or secondary waves. There's nothing in the front. So we may have something going on at Yellowstone. I'm not sure. Historically, when people do nuclear device testing, that's what this is right here, when the guy from North Korea tested a nuclear device. This is the seismograph right here. Vertical energy, vertical energy. I'll even play it for you. They recorded it in China. That's probably something similar to what it sounded like maybe in Idaho last night. I don't know. Here again, this goes back to 2011. There was an earthquake in Denver and DC, respectively. Guys were saying that the seismographs were similar to a nuclear test in the Indian Ocean. The red is the nuclear test. The blue is a classic earthquake. See what I mean? So I don't know, guys, if we're testing nuclear devices in Idaho or some sort of bombs, if something came from the sky.
Ready for the show? I'm ready to start.
10, 9, ignition sequence starts.
Yes, my dear friends all over the world, this planetary system, the galaxy, this universe and beyond. I'm speaking here on ET First Contact Radio, and my name is Maarten Horst. I give you 3 times a week the latest galactic news, and I have a very interesting gentleman next to me from Scotland. His name is George Smith, and George is an amazing, really an amazing person. I met him yesterday at the Barge Inn in Wiltshire, UK, where the crop circles appear. So without further ado, George, I want to welcome you to my show, ET First Contact Radio.
Thank you very much.
It's an honor to have you on the show, and why don't we start to talk about the early years, your childhood, and what happened there?
Okay. I don't speak about anything before the age of 12 years old. The experiences I've been having have continued more or less all through my life. Mainly, the experiences were always up in Aberdeenshire, because that was where I was brought up. We have a farm up there, or we had a farm. My father and mother passed away, and I inherited one of the farms. So later on, that was I was about 20. Things were quiet through until approximately 1991. It really kicked off. So I had a lot of this happen. But in the 1991 approximately, things really started to heat up. And this is when I was seeing these UFOs at night.
Wow.
And at that time, in the 1990s, 91, 92, I was only getting approximately 3 earthquakes a week. And a big one might be around 3.3 on a Richter scale, 3.2. So now, when you look at the earthquakes around the world, I haven't looked at it today or for the last few weeks here, I'm sorry. But there was a while there, they were way up at 170, huge amounts of earthquakes. And a 3.3 you didn't even think about, because they're way up in the 5, 6, 7s, and sometimes touching 8s. So our whole system in the earthquake region has completely shot off the scale compared to what it was when I was first looking and monitoring it. Back in 1990, they asked me to study and monitor earthquakes and volcanoes around the world. Now, in 1990, I didn't have access to the internet. And I used to go to Aberdeen now and again. I'd go to the library and get the Lloyd's insurance list. It was only 4 pages in the Lloyd's insurance list. And in there you got a little article, volcanoes, and underneath it was earthquakes, or other way around, I can't remember. But the two were together. And this was because the Lloyd's insurance needed to monitor earthquakes and volcanoes. The reason being, they would not insure against a volcano if you were in a volcano active region, or if you are in an earthquake active region, they will not insure you against an earthquake. Or if they do, it will be a very minimal amount. And this was in the early 1990s. But I was also having some problems with the police. So I had to leave home for a while. So I went to this friend of mine. So I stayed with him for a while. And when I was at his house, for 6 weeks, for 5 nights, for over 6-week period, I was seeing UFOs in the sky. And on some of the occasions, one day I was out watching them, and they would appear as they usually did, and I'd ask them to move around in the sky for me through using telepathy.
Hey folks, it's Friday, November 29th, about 11:10 Mountain Time, 2013. Fire in the Sky News here at the American Meteor Society. It looks like the meteor storm, whatever you want to call it, is still well underway. We've got 104 reports, coast to coast, literally in almost every state across the United States. Got reports from multiples from Canada and France. But something is causing this. Something's causing this, crazy looking comet that just zipped by. Comet Ison. Look at that thing. What kind of comet was that? Was that even a comet? I mean, if we go back to, here it is on Soho, If we go back to the Hubble images that they gave us, you know, what was it, back in May or April or something like that? Looks like a triangle right there. I'm not saying that's what it is, but I'm just saying, look at it. So there's a lot of mystery around this thing. And, you know, we're playing it off like, well, we don't know what it is, or, you know, this is all new and unknown. It also looks like it's changed its path. So, not only that, there's 3 other comets out here right now. So what could be causing all the comets just barreling towards the sun? Here's proof right here, you know. I mean, that's one hell of a comet. And if you look at the SDO images of the perihelion, you can't even see it on there. Pulled a Harry Houdini. Went right in front of the instruments and they didn't even see it. I looked at it for a long time. Couldn't find it. So, I don't know, guys. Hey, folks, it's Tuesday, December 3rd, about 1:40 Mountain Time, 2013. I just ran across this photograph taken by a lady from Sumterville, Florida. And she took this photograph over here on the left. It's obviously of sunset. And this really cool V in the sky. Her name's Paula Phillips. All credit goes to her. I found the image on spaceweather.com. I'll post the link if you'd like to check it out. But what I found interesting is she took this photograph on Thanksgiving Day during the evening. And coincidentally, that was at the exact time of Comet Ison's perihelion. And I've done just a little bit of research on this right here, and it's hard to even find anything on this because they're so rare. I did happen to find one website, this guy right here, I'll post the link, and his name happens to be cometman.com. And he took a picture of this phenomenon. And this was on December 23rd, but I can't find a year. But I found it odd that one of the few rare pictures of this phenomenon is by a gentleman that's got this website up of some really cool stuff. He goes by the handle of Comet Man. So I'm just wondering if this rare phenomenon has something to do with the passage of comets. I don't know, but that is crazy cool. I've never seen anything like that, and I'm an avid sky watcher. Never seen anything like that. Zoom in just a little bit closer. Look at that. And it just so happened that she sees that right as the comet is right there. Just sharing, guys. As always, you decide. But I found that incredibly cool and incredibly rare.
Enlightenment. And that is usually at that moment. For example, at Mount Shasta a few years ago, the first time I did that particular protocol, which I'd always done silently but not out loud because I didn't want it to get too weird, I said, then at that point, I said, oh, who cares? So I did it, and at the instant we reached that point, this enormous spacecraft appeared in the sky, and a man was told to look up. And in deep space was an object moving that was at least several hundred miles across, perhaps several thousand miles. It was seen from southern Canada down to LA, and it was moving under its own steam, and it was interacting with us. And it was these 3 points, like 3 stars, but it was enormous. And in the middle, where you should have seen stars, was this distorted, because it wasn't, that part of it wasn't quite materialized. And I knew it was this massive tetrahedral spacecraft that we've had contact with. That's an interplanetary center in deep space. And they were moving in at exactly the moment that we reached that point of the transformation of Earth. And it turned, if you can imagine the triangle in Pegasus, if you know the star, how big that triangle is in Pegasus, it was that size. Huge. Moving, and it moved across, turned, came over towards us, then went out. And as it was leaving, I signaled with this laser that I have.
You can't even see it on there. Pulled a Harry Houdini. Went right in front of the instruments and they didn't even see it.
Because it wasn't, that part of it wasn't quite materialized.
You can't even see it on there. Pulled a Harry Houdini. Went right in front of the instruments and they didn't even see it.
Because it wasn't, that part of it wasn't quite materialized.
You can't even see it on there. Pulled a Harry Houdini. Went right in front of the instruments and they didn't even see it.
Because it wasn't, that part of it wasn't quite materialized.
All right, welcome back, Fade to Black, on the Game Changer Network and KGRA The Planet. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Dr. Stephen GREER, back with us. And Dr. GREER, what I wanted to ask you right before the break is there has always been this, the ET presence is malevolent, it's benevolent, there's a war going on, there isn't a war going on, they're here to save us, they're here to take over the planet. And for me, I listen to everybody, you know, on my show. I listen to it, and I let my audience, you know, decide and research and so forth. But for you, has your attitude or your feelings about that changed, or as something on one side or the other solidified?
If there were genuinely malevolent ETs, I'm not talking about demons and spirits from other dimensions. I'm talking about interstellar civilization. With the kinds of technologies we're talking about, the moment that we detonated atomic weapons and then nuclear weapons, it would have been over, and certainly going into space with them. So I think, you know, one of the things I said to an Air Force colonel at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base some years ago, you know, I went to this meeting right after I was at the Rockefeller Ranch, Lawrence Rockefeller, and this guy was bringing this issue up, and I said, sir, the fact that you and I are still breathing the free air of Earth is abundant testimony to their restraint, given how stupid and how militaristic our response to them has been. Now, with that said, what I think is that there are many different civilizations out there, and I think some of them are less than pleased with how humans, and particularly our military, are behaving. But I don't think that's necessarily a sign of malevolence. I think that's a sign of common sense, because if you were to step back from our planet for a second, look, in 100 years, we have killed hundreds of millions of people, of our own people, in warfare. We've gone from cannons and machine guns to thermonuclear weapons. We have gone from the early industrial era to now degrading the biosphere to such a point that one of the 5 directors of NASA told me that if the public knew how bad it was, there'd be panic. So my point is that any civilization watching this would be shocked and appalled.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cosmic Truth. My name's Janine Regan Sinclair, and I'm your host. And today we have a very special guest with us, an amazing man who's working all over the world and bringing some enlightening information to everybody about extraterrestrials, about non-fossil fuels, all sorts of fascinating stuff. His name is Dr. Stephen GREER, and Stephen is the founder of the Disclosure Project.
But so as a result, my medical career was just sort of pretty much on track. I'm chairman of trauma and emergency medicine at this hospital, taking care of all kinds of gruesome things, and shootings and stabbings and car wrecks and burns and dead babies and everything you can imagine. But during all that, I had an experience where I was contacted by an extraterrestrial senior ambassador who said, basically, pick up that which you have dropped. It was not in an accusatory way. It just said, get going with what you know is true about this issue that we're here. And that was in 1990. That was 24 years ago in January. The reality is that if you're an interstellar civilization and you're able to reach Earth, you're not allowed to get out of your biosphere very far with those kind of technologies until you have accepted the prime directive of universal peace. Why? Because you could absolutely destroy entire planets with technologies that are faster than the speed of light, which are scalar electromagnetic weapon systems. Now, fast forward to where we are right now,
it's sort of back to the future. Covert programs, I know in the United States and some elsewhere, have these sort of technologies that we've been studying for 60, 70 years, and we have weaponized them. The Oslo spiral, the blue spiral that was over Norway when Obama was getting the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009, that was the detonation of a scalar electromagnetic weapon to warn the president off of what we were briefing him on about all this and to end the secrecy.
Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals.
So what could be causing all the comets just barreling towards the sun?
Spacecraft that we've had contact with. That's an interplanetary center in deep space.
1991 it really kicked off. But in the 1991 approximately, things really started to heat up. And this is when I was seeing these UFOs at night.
Because in 92 we went there.
And the earthquake region has completely shot off the scale.
I was contacted by an extraterrestrial senior ambassador. That was in 1990.
Back in 1990, they asked me to study and monitor earthquakes and volcanoes around the world.
So you could spit these things out, 121 nuclear, probably 10, 15 megaton weapons, a tactical type nuclear reentry vehicle.
Its swarm has picked up, there's quite a swarm that's picked up.
Hoping to find out why the so-called swarms are happening.
So that tells us one thing, that this energy burst came from the sky or very close, if not on top of the ground.
One of the 5 directors of NASA told me that if the public knew how bad it was, there'd be panic.
Nuclear devices in Idaho or some sort of bombs, if something came from the sky.
The connection between the sun's activity, and the earthquakes.
You could absolutely destroy entire planets. That was the detonation of a scalar electromagnetic weapon to warn the president off.
In the scalar components. And that's what is gradually being radiated back to us. If you pollute one part of this system, the pollution feeds and spreads to the whole tri-system.
Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals.
So what could be causing all the comets just barreling towards the sun?
Spacecraft that we've had contact with. That's an interplanetary center in deep space.
So that's the big part. I think a more interesting part is the clinical picture, because the people I've run into since this has come out in the last 60 days are some people who went down there to where this creature was found, and they found in some of the old mining areas where they had were digging in the late 1800s, they would cut into what were these underground cities. And apparently Ed Snowden, the NSA leaker, put out in part of his thing that there were documents dealing with ultra-terrestrials. There were ETs that had taken up residence on Earth and were living underground, which is what they're called. Yes, sir?
I think the aliens actually come from out Earth, like inside the Earth, not outside.
Do
you think the ETs come from out Earth?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there may be some that have been here a long time that may have subterranean and suboceanic. Bush's elder science advisor told us that there was off the coast of England, between off of your northeast coast, an area deep underwater where they had picked up ET vehicles coming in and out. But it doesn't mean that that's where they originated, but they could have outposts there. Now a lot of people say, well, why should they be so discreet? I said, because they know that we know, and that if they were to do something massively overt, it would be spun by the spin doctors in the military and in the media as an alien invasion. All right? If I figure this out with my limited intelligence, I know they have, because they're cruising around with IQs of 400 to 500. And frankly, we have to understand that they're waiting for us. The sign that we're ready for more open contact is when more of us are doing CE5, when we quit lying to each other about their existence, and when we start doing something constructive to stand down the weaponization of space and the attempts to create a new enemy out there. So those are things that they're wanting us to fix. And people say, well, can't they fix it? I said, well, I guess they could land here, but it would be no more successful than us going into Afghanistan to a medieval society and trying to institute Jeffersonian democracy. I mean, are you kidding me with this crap?
It was an early hit for what is now a very well-developed Star Wars program that's sitting in space. So from 1947 to 1965, they perfected the way they use electromagnetic scalar Tesla-like longitudinal waves to try to disrupt. And the kill rate, I hate to use that term, but what they call the kill rate was very low. Now it's skyrocketed. And since 65, there have been platforms in space. I have a man on my team who worked on with Hughes Aerospace and a whole bunch of companies in Southern California that have been able to track, target, and hit with increasing success the extraterrestrial vehicles once they're detected.
So, with this, it brings you into a lot of learning whereabout these UFOs appear. And what we did find out was, what I did learn was, they always appeared in the same places in the sky. They would cross the sky and they would disappear at the same areas. And later on, I began to realize there was a stone circle in the area they would appear and a stone circle in the area they disappeared.
Interesting.
So later in my life, I then had to go and visit all the stone circles in the Aberdeenshire area.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the stone circles are all connected with ley lines.
Mm-hmm.
But the stone circles connect right back to the pyramids.
Indeed, yes.
And the learning, where I thought I started out just to be a farmer, my learning took me into learning about stone circles, ley lines, energy, people, places. This year I just came back from Poland.
Mm-hmm.
I was out in Poland for 12 weeks. And I went out to the stone circles in the north of Poland.
Interesting.
And they are amazing. Absolutely amazing. When I was there on one night, I looked up in the sky and there was a couple of UFOs moving around. So let's get back to the 1990s. Mm-hmm. That is an exciting period of time. It was 1997, I think, May 1997. I'm in our local pub. The dance is going to be going on Saturday night. And this guy's, as I'm walking around the hall, put out their arm and says, "Hey, George, what's happened to your motorbike?" I says, "Oh, it's away getting a mural put on." "Oh, what's the mural that you're putting on?" As in the picture that you're getting drawn on the petrol tank. I says, "Oh, it's a picture of Jesus feeding the 5,000. The people, there were 3 men sitting at the table and they all looked at one another. They then looked back at me and they said, "The same theme." So they all looked at one another again. One of them says, "Take him outside." So one of them says, "Both of us?" "No, just you." So I'm taken outside, or asked to come outside with him. So we went out into the car park away to the far end. This guy says, "You know, you caused us a lot of trouble with that mural you had on your motorbike." And I'm looking at the guy thinking, what? Oh, I don't understand. He says, oh, he says, we're from the Air Force at Lossiemouth. Lossiemouth is approximately 45 miles from where I am in Aberdeenshire. Lossiemouth is the main Air Force base in the north of Scotland.
Yes.
So these three guys are from the Air Force base. So the trouble that I had caused was, he says, we, the people at RAF Lossiemouth, were all questioned. Who revealed that information about the ETs to George? Which of you guys at the Air Force base revealed this information to George? And the guy's saying, we're all saying, it wasn't me, it wasn't me, it wasn't me. And they're all saying, none of them revealed any information. The guy from the Air Force base said, anyone with any connection to my area was questioned. And he said, we were really questioned. So he says, it was accepted that we had not said a word. We had not told anyone. We hadn't said anything. So he says, the guy starts shaking now. He says, the decision was made that you had to be taken out. And I'm looking up at this guy. I'm not very tall. I'm a little guy. And I'm looking up at this guy thinking, oh, you're a bunch of hardy guys. Wow, this is going to be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So the Air Force guy says, we knew where it was going to be done, how it was going to be done, and who was going to do it. And I'm standing there sort of looking at the guy thinking, wow, interesting. So then he says to me, the Air Force guy says, before we went to do it, as in take me out, have me murdered, we were approached by your friends, your brothers and sisters.
From the stars.
The star brothers and sisters. We're approached by your friends and told, back off, do not touch. Now we want you to go and speak to George and give him this information. So here is the information that was shared with me.
This will be exciting, my friends.
So what the guy from the Air Force said was, imagine you come downstairs in the morning and you go to your fish tank. And I'm standing there nodding, thinking, yeah, I understand. Totally understand. You look and see that all the fish are okay. And you look for your favorite fish and see it is okay. And I stood there nodding, thinking, yeah, I understand this. Yeah, fully understand. He says, you go, you have your breakfast, you get in over your car, you drive to Aberdeen, you make a phone call to America, you get in over an aeroplane, you fly to London. You come back home at night and you go to the fish tank and you look and see the fish. And you look to see your favorite one is okay. I'm standing there nodding, thinking, yeah, I understand this. Understand exactly. The Air Force guy said to me, well, we are the fish in the fish tank, and your friends are us going to Aberdeen, phoning America, and flying to London.
Mm-hmm.
How do you tell the fish in the fish tank what you did all day? Because their world is in the fish tank. They do not understand distance. They do not understand cars. They do not understand telephones.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you see it like that, it makes a lot of sense for some people. But I already knew this information. What actually happened was, I was then told that let me know that our star brothers and sisters were visiting RAF Lossiemouth. So what the guy then told me was, or first he asked me a few questions. He says, how many different types do you meet? So I'm standing counting with my fingers on 1, 2, 3, 4. I'd got to 4. And he then said, where do you meet them? But I had not answered how many different types I meet.
Mm-hmm.
I did not answer where I meet them.
Mm-hmm.
Then he said, what technology have they given you to work on in your shed? And my mouth dropped. I was shocked that they knew this information.
Yes.
That they knew that I had been given. I did not answer that question. Now, here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, go on.
This guy told me that he drove the bus for the RAF Lossiemouth base. And on one occasion, they had taken out of the sky and downed a UFO right next to where I was living. And they came and picked it up and took it back to RAF Lossiemouth. And I immediately thought, I know which night that was. I remember that night. I remember the military vehicles. And I thought, you sick and sick. That was for me to go and back engineer. So this UFO is sitting at RAF Lossiemouth. But the guy also told me that they had picked up quite a few craft in the northeast of Scotland. And they had them at RAF Lossiemouth. And what he told me was, says, we don't have an effing clue how this stuff works. But he pointed to me and said, you do. So that then brings us into a huge amount of knowledge of what's going on within the military base at RAF Lossiemouth. The 1990s was a fairly hectic period of time for me.
Yes.
And it's starting again just now. It's been pretty hectic over the last 10 years.
Off of your northeast coast.
In the northeast of Scotland.
Off of your northeast coast.
Of what's going on within the military base at RAF Lossiemouth.
Track, target, and hit the extraterrestrial vehicles.
They had taken out of the sky and downed a UFO.
Off of your northeast coast.
In the northeast of Scotland.
Off of your northeast coast.
Of what's going on within the military base at RAF Lossiemouth.
Track, target, and hit the extraterrestrial vehicles.
They had taken out of the sky and downed a UFO.
If I was the president, I would immediately race to wherever they have the files about Area 51 and the UFOs, and I'd go through everything to find out what happened. Right. Did you do that?
That's why you will not be president.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
This is the Marilyn Monroe document. It's basically a death warrant for poor Marilyn. It's a very dangerous document to have.
And he said, Lieutenant, you are never to speak of this again. As far as you're concerned, this didn't happen.
Look, this would be the greatest discovery in the history of science. NASA would be elated. Of course, they'd go to Congress to get more funding. Why would anybody cover this up?
When people find out about that, they're going to say, who put that there? Who put that there?
And you know, there's a new name. It's unexplained aerial phenomenon. That's the latest nomenclature.
I like the old one. I like UFO.
Unacknowledged special access projects. These are projects for which there is no constitutional oversight by Congress and no knowledge by the President. At this time, between 100 billion and 200 billion US dollars a year, every year, are going into those projects.
The implications are so huge. It's not just the energy sector. Would 99.999% of humanity benefit if it was used peacefully? If it was used peacefully, yes.
In 100 years, we have killed hundreds of millions of people of our own people in warfare. We've gone from cannons and machine guns to thermonuclear weapons to now degrading the biosphere to such a point that one of the 5 directors of NASA told me that if the public knew how bad it was, there'd be panic.